Welcome back to MMA Al Dente. Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. This is the people's main event and a damn good fight on this dog shit card called UFC 289. Charles Oliveira is one of the most exciting fighters in the world. I was about to say he's the most exciting fighter in the world, in the division even. And then I looked down and saw the word Gaethje on my notes. So I guess I can't commit to that. But Charles Oliveira is one of the most exciting lightweights ever and one of the most exciting fighters ever. 33-9 record. Of his 33 wins, he's got 9 knockouts or TKOs, 21 submissions, and just 3 decisions in his 33 wins. His 9 losses, which is also part of the excitement, he's got 8 finishes. He's been finished 8 times, I should say, in his 9 losses. 4 times via TKO or knockout, 4 via submission, and just 1 decision to Frankie Edgar, who was too small to really beat him up. Beneil Dariush, his losses are all via finish, but he's got a good chunk of decision victories. His record is 22-4-1, the one draw being to Evan Dunham in the UFC. His 22 wins, though, he's got 5 TKOs or knockouts, mostly knockouts as we've seen in the UFC, and 8 submissions. He's also got 9 decision victories, so he's 9-0 in decisions. Unless you ask Michael Johnson about that, then he might have something to say. But anyway, his 4 losses, 3 via knockout, 1 via submission. The only guy to ever submit him was Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa is one of the best grapplers on top, in the world, in the UFC, I should say. I know there's a whole world of grappling out there, but as an MMA fighter, Michael Chiesa is a problem for anybody if he gets on top of you. I remember saying when he fought Kevin Lee, the winner of this fight is the best top game grappler in the lightweight division, and Kevin Lee ended up winning that. But anyway, Michael Chiesa got him out of there with a rear naked choke. The only other guy that I could envision submitting Beneil Dariush, well, I should say the only 2, are Charles and Islam. Nobody else, though. Nobody else. His 3 losses via knockout are to Ramsey Nijem, Edson Barboza, and Alexander Hernandez. After he lost to Hernandez, especially because Hernandez was making his debut and he knocked Dariush out in 25 seconds or whatever, I said to myself, that's it for Dariush. He will never reach the heights. He's done. He might win his next fight, might win his next 2 fights, but in his next 5 fights, he's going to lose 2 or 3 of them, and he's going to be knocked out at least once. And I was wrong. Not only was he not knocked out, he hasn't been defeated, and it hasn't been 4 or 5 fights. It's been like 7 or 8 fights, and he's looked better and better. His chin has been tested along the way. He got cracked big by Drakkar Klose. He's been cracked in every fight, but he was stumbling against Drakkar Klose, and his instincts kicked in, and he said, fuck this, and bit down on his mouthpiece, started throwing back, and he had the firepower to back up his grit, and he got him out of there, like 5-10 seconds later. So, or really 3 seconds later. And that wasn't even, that's one of his finest moments, but not his finest knockout. That'd probably be the Scott Holtzman knockout, spinning back fist. He also put out James Vick earlier, which anytime you knock him out, it's going to look pretty. So yeah, let me stop talking about how pretty the knockouts were. But my point is, Beneil Dariush, I think he's got serious firepower. He's got the harder overhand punch. That's what I mean by power. But as far as overall danger on the feet, you give each guy a fucking rock-solid chin, and Charles Oliveira is the better striker. No doubt about it. Charles Oliveira is a much more dynamic striker. He's got really good... I think he's got really good power in his hands, which are his weakest, his weakest strikes, I'd want to say. But he's still got good power in his hands, just because he's got fine technique. But his strikes up the middle and his kicks, that's what makes him a much more dangerous striker. And he's really turned into a more powerful guy. He started off like Chase Hooper, and now, I don't want to say he's like Alex Pereira, but he's definitely turned into a big, strong man at lightweight here, and he's a much more dangerous striker. But, again, he's been finished 8 times. The TKOs come to Cub Swanson, Max Holloway, Cowboy Cerrone, Paul Felder. That was the last one. Max Holloway was an injury, but damn, I really wish we could have seen that fight, because like 2 years ago or whatever, that would have been like a super fight. But his 4 losses via submission come to Jim Miller, Islam Makhachev, Ricardo Lamas, and Anthony Pettis. You know, he's submittable, Charles Oliveira. Despite being the most dangerous submission artist, even more dangerous than Islam Makhachev, he's still quite submittable. And I could see Dariush getting a submission down the stretch. Dariush, aside from Frank Camacho and Charlie Brenneman early on, his submissions typically come later. You know, that's when he gets you away. Anthony Rocco Martin, or just Rocco Martin, Drew Dober, whoever the hell else. But, you know, at the UFC level, Beneil Dariush rarely runs through guys with a submission win early on. I think Charles Oliveira, and I've said this before, I believe in his fight against Islam Makhachev, but I'll say this in most of his fights. I'm playing him round 1, Charles Oliveira. I do think he's probably best served coming out of the gate like a bat out of hell and trying to get shit going, because he's so dangerous. He may as well try to get all his danger in there before the defensive vulnerabilities show up. And I think that's the case with him here. I do think overall, if they start fighting for 15 minutes, both guys are comfortable. You know, not for 15 minutes, but for longer than a round, Beneil Dariush will start to take over the fight. He'll start to take over. Charles will be running out of options and getting, you know, even though he'll be landing on Dariush, he'll be getting cracked. And I expect Dariush's power to make more of a difference. You know, I think Charles Oliveira could crack him with something big, especially something up the middle. But if he doesn't, then Dariush, it becomes who's going to take over the fight with the harder strikes and the more sound defense. It's going to be Beneil Dariush. Charles Oliveira has been dropped in, I think, his last 3 fights. Islam Makhachev cracked him. Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier. He's been knocked down multiple times in these fights too, or some of them anyway. He's still a very susceptible guy, even though he hasn't been finished with strikes since Paul Felder. He's a guy that was definitely more vulnerable early on here, but I think against Dariush, he's not going to be able to bully him around. He's going to have a harder time submitting him than he would others. And I think even though he's submitted some great grapplers along the way, I still think back to that Hioki Anaconda, whatever the fuck he has like a variation for every different submission too, because, Charles Oliveira has such long arms. But Charles, he's definitely got a lot of danger in there, and I do think he could get Dariush out of there if Dariush gives him his neck. But Dariush, I'm expecting to mind his P's and Q's and make this a more battle of, attrition and durability. And I expect Dariush to win that along the way. So Dariush is my pick. I think he gets him out of there with... a submission wouldn't surprise me, but I think he would get him out of there more likely with a TKO. And I predict it would happen in round 2, I guess. But my only bets for the fight are Dariush via finish, plus 165. Charles Oliveira via round 1 submission, plus 1,300. I had to pounce on that. And round 1 flat, plus 400. And I bet on the under at minus 180 because it goes in parlays. That's, those are pretty long odds there. But I'm very sure this one ends in a finish. I know I could see Beneil's, making this taking a conservative approach, staying out of danger, minding his P's and Q's and fighting to a decision. I know you could probably envision that, but I just think, some guys are just glass cannons. They're destined to be finished if they lose. And I think Charles, Beneil, either one of them loses, they're going to find a way to get finished. So I'm really expecting one. And that's the breakdown. The pick is Beneil Dariush. And, of course, I will hedge with Charles Oliveira round 1, coming out like a bat out of hell. Like, share, subscribe, all that horse shit, and check out my other videos.